Welcome, critters. I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine Critical Role episodes, plot lines, characters, and players through the lens of sacred reading practices. This particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 33, Part 1, and joining me today is Petall.
Hello.
So the icebreaker that I found today is, do you believe in ghosts?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think my answer is I would like to believe in ghosts. I would like to live in a world where ghosts are real, but I don't think I actually do believe in ghosts, but I'm really disappointed about it.
Disappointed in yourself for the lack of
Yeah.
belief.
Yeah.
Well, I am a firm believer. I am convinced that I've actually seen one.
Oh, nice.
My house that I lived in throughout high school, my mom's house was a very old farmhouse, and I think it was built in like 1905, something like that. And all of us in the family are pretty much convinced that it was haunted in some shape or form. My
Nice.
mom used to hear things in the middle of the nights, steps, not really voices, but just things moving around in the house. And she also claimed to see moving lights when it was night out inside the house. And I did hear similar steps and things like that. I had my computer in the rear family room of the house, and it was like kind of in the back corner. And there were nights where I heard people walking around behind me while I was at the computer, and I would like turn
Hmm.
around and look, and like no one was there. And I'd like, everyone else is in bed at that point. But there was one night where we were all coming home at an unusual time. We had like really weird schedules that day, and I just happened to be the first one in the house. And so I was walking through the kitchen towards the front hallway, and I saw the figure of a man walking away from me, and I thought
Hmm.
it was my stepdad. And so I got really confused because I thought he was getting the garbage cans outside. And I was like, how did he get in the house before I did? And so I walked after him, like calling his name. And the figure turned and walked up the staircase in the front hallway. And that's when I realized that it wasn't my stepdad. And I just started screaming my head off. Like I screamed bloody murder, ran back to my mom. I literally like jumped on top of her. I was so freaked out. But yeah, I'm convinced I saw one at one point.
Nice.
hmm Yeah, that house was very interesting to live in. Like my mom heard I had a TV in my room, but I was having a slumber party in the family room one night, and she was convinced that the TV in my room turned on by itself in the middle of the night at some point.
Interesting.
Yeah. So weird stuff happened in that house.
It sounds like it.
So I will bestow my belief unto you if you so desire.
Thank you. Like I said, if I want to believe in ghosts, but my brain won't let me.
Yeah.
So maybe someday.
Yeah. Just go to a haunted house, like an actually haunted house.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, my city has some ghost tours. I'm
hmm
sure I could just go on one of those.
Yeah. I mean, who knows how accurate they are at the end of the day, but yes.
Yeah.
Well, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. As always, we love hearing your own insights and stories as well. So please comment, like, subscribe below. And ready? All right, let's dive in. So, Vox Machina, they are currently in the process of infiltrating Whitestone Castle, which is Percy's childhood home that has been taken over by the villainous Lord and Lady Briarwood after jumpstarting a grassroots rebellion within the city. And so this episode opens with the party deep in the dungeons of the castle where Vex is pretending to help a suspicious old woman out of her cell. She intentionally breaks her lockpick, and the old woman angrily clutches Vex's arm. And Vex notices that the woman is missing a hand, but it is covered by an illusion that the woman has cast on herself. So Vex apologizes and mentions that they will come back for her, then returns to the rest of the party. Vex asks Scanlan how his seeming spell works when it comes to physical contact, and he does confirm that it was an illusion. So they deduce that the woman is definitely some type of caster. They discuss how to dispel it, and Keyleth reveals that she does have dispel magic. So Scanlan requests that the old woman reveal her true self or be left in her cell to die, that they are not fooled by her deception, and Keyleth casts the spell. A black haired adult woman, a little over the age of 40, is revealed, and she panics, steps back, and realizes that she's been made. Dropping all pretense, she introduces herself as Anna. She wants to be set free and that she can be of assistance regarding the Briarwoods. Percy, of course, recognizes her as Dr. Anna Ripley, clued into the fact that her right hand is missing. Percy steps out of the shadows, disguised as a Whitestone peasant with his hat of disguise, and he threatens Ripley with the fact that she can either die in her cell or convince them why they shouldn't kill her. Ripley tells them about her role in the Briarwood scheme. She was apparently involved in the fall of Percy's family 5 years prior and helped Silas and Delilah Briarwood establish their rule over the city after its destruction. She was also one of their chief scientific designers for the project beneath the city involving the ziggurat. When pressed for more information about the experiment, she mentions that the Briarwoods know more about it, that she was not involved with the more intricate details other than the construction that she was brought in for. Percy presses on why she's currently in a cell, and she tells him that her work was finished and that she no longer wanted to stay in the city with the impending battle on the horizon. She prefers to not choose sides nor get involved, so she tried to leave, but Professor Anders caught her. Seeking to gain favor with the Briarwoods, he threw her in the dungeon to wait out the experiment until its completion. Vex asks about her missing hand, and she only explains that experiments with chemicals can be dangerous. Grog asks if she's seeking revenge against her former employers, and she mentions that perhaps she would be based on the treatment she has endured. Percy then asks if she can lead them to Cassandra DeRollo. Curious, she says that she can and asks why, to which Percy replies that accepting would be worth her life. Ripley requests that the party free her again, but Percy steps forward saying, "You know who your friends are here. Do you know that we are friends?" And he casts friends, then asks if she's been truthful with them, and she says that she has had no reason to lie at this point and reluctantly agrees to aid the party in finding Cassandra. Vex asks if she's a magic user, and she replies that she's a woman of science, that her entire purpose for being in Whitestone was for the experiment, but she's not without her tricks. Percy lays down the terms of her release, that she takes them to Cassandra, and that she tells them what she knows about what is in the basement, more about the Briarwoods, as well as where they can find Anders. In exchange, she may be let go and may leave the castle. Ripley then asks if they will keep her safe until it's time to part, and they agree. Vex remarks that this is Clarota all over again. "You are, at the moment, the luckiest person in Whitestone," Percy says. "Do you know why? Because you're at the bottom of my list." One of the many great one-liners in this episode. Percy then removes the hat of disguise, revealing his true self to the woman who had tortured him 5 years ago. Upon seeing him, Ripley is taken aback, smiling and laughing, but not without some fear. She says that she has many questions and found his recent work very fascinating, and Percy promises to give her an up-and-close, very personal demonstration, unless she'd rather talk about other topics. Ripley chooses the latter. Vax reluctantly agrees to work on picking the lock properly, but not before threatening her with the fact that his allies are very good at what they do and that she should tread very carefully. Vex asks Trinket to keep an eye on Ripley as she steps out of her cell. Percy threatens that if he catches even the slightest hint that she is going to make a run for it, then he would like her to know that he's learned so much more than what she taught him, and he cannot wait to show her. Ripley requests that they stop by her room to gather her things, and the party agrees under the stipulation that they grab the things for her. They follow her out of the dungeon, and the group steps into an empty chamber that is eerily quiet. Ripley notes that there are usually more individuals within the halls, and the party suspects that it's due to the rebellion happening outside at the moment. Knowing that time is of the essence, the party debates on why they're even going to Ripley's chambers, but Percy is insistent on seeing Ripley's work for himself and presses his gun into her back as they continue onward. Vex opens one of the hallway doors, revealing a music room. The twins inspect it further, looking out the window and seeing that the Whitestone Rebellion is indeed going on outside. As they leave, Vax insists on giving his cloak of elven kind to his sister. As they continue on, Pike, still in her astral state, stops walking, lost in thought. She notes that there is a great evil here, and her form begins to flicker as she vanishes. The party laments the loss of their friends, but Vax notices a warmth on his hand, the symbol of Sarenrae on his glove pulsing with a faint light. Percy shifts his disguise to that of a Whitestone Castle guard and lowers his weapon. Ripley does breathe a sigh of relief. As they keep moving, they notice that the closed front doors to the castle are indeed closed, and Grog and Vax toss a couple dozen caltrops toward them. As they make their way up to the second floor, Keyleth casts Enhance Ability to give Percy a boost to his charisma in case they get busted, and they make their way to the eastern side of the castle, which contains guest rooms as well as the rooms that housed Anders' study. They enter Ripley's chambers. Keyleth and Vax keeping watch outside. Inside, Percy notices that the vast majority of the room has been converted into an alchemical laboratory. Ripley pulls out a small chest as Percy watches very intently, revealing a set of basic leather armor. Percy tells Ripley that he had almost killed her in Stillben long ago, and she says she didn't know that it was him. Vex takes the leather armor from Ripley, then Ripley pulls out two glass vials, sets them aside, and removes the chest's false bottom to pull out her own work, which is a revolver similar to Percy's. They also note that part of the setup within the room is for the purpose of making and refining ammunition and powder for this weapon. They also see on the table sketches containing outlines and notes of Percy's gun recalled from secondhand accounts. Percy notes his disappointment at how unimaginative her weapon is compared to his, and Ripley says that she prefers function, to which Percy calls her a hack. When she reaches for the weapon, the party stops her and she is informed that it will be given to her when she leaves. She protests that she won't be able to defend herself without it should things go ass up. She correctly assumes that they are here to end the Briarwood's reign and it won't end peacefully. Vax says that Grog could kill her at any time, and she begrudgingly surrenders the weapon and any available ammunition to the party. They agree to give her the armor, though, as a sign of good faith. Ripley then takes the vials and a pouch of money with her. Upon being threatened again, she gives up the two vials, nearly shattering them as she hands them over, one of which is a healing potion and the other is a potion of flying. Percy takes Ripley's notes and anything else useful as they leave, muttering how much he hates what she has done to the room. Vex and Keyleth say that he can always come back to inspect once the Briarwoods are gone. Continuing onward, they head to Cassandra's chambers as Vax sneaks ahead. They arrive at her door, and Percy quickly asks Ripley if there will be anything inside that will cause him to have a violent reaction toward her. Ripley hopes that there isn't, as Percy opens the door, pushing Ripley in as he enters behind her. It seems like Cassandra had been in the room recently, but there is no sign of her. Percy inspects the room and finds several keepsakes, including a partially burned picture of herself and her family. He also notices a stack of notes that are addressed to Archibald Desnay. They contain details about the general unrest in the city, preparation for a possible rebellion, and past failures. Based on the notes, she had been working with Archibald in various attempts to overthrow the Briarwoods, but with no success. When asked where Cassandra could be, Ripley claims that she prefers not to pay attention to the well-being of others, only that she is usually in her room. Percy loses his patience and threatens Ripley again, pointing his gun at her head. Vex asks if Cassandra is in the castle of her own volition, and Keyleth says she has a bad feeling about this. Ripley mentions that Cassandra is not allowed anywhere near the ziggurat or the distillery, and he lowers his weapon to allow her to explain. The distillery is the project that Ripley had been working on with the Briarwoods. When she was brought in, she was tasked to create an acid meant to dissolve the white stone that the region is known for and distill it. The resulting residuum would allow for the bulk creation of a very powerful magical substance for use in construction and materials that they can use for the ziggurat and other things. Ripley notes that they were ahead of schedule weeks ago and thus she was no longer needed. Keyleth presses Ripley further about the schedule, and she elaborates that they were attempting to create enough residuum to be used in the construction of the ziggurat. After that, her job was done. Hearing this, Scanlan pulls out his potion of acid resistance and drinks it. They press her for more information on the ziggurat's purpose, but she has nothing to give other than it is related to the Briarwoods scheme involving a third party, and that she also has no information on that either, considering she was never interested. As to the location of the ziggurat, Ripley says that it is past the distillery underground, most likely directly underneath the sun tree and Whitestone itself. Ripley confirms again that the melting process has concluded and that there is still a surplus of acid beneath the castle. The party begins to fear the worst and make plans to pursue the Briarwoods downstairs beneath the castle, but Ripley mentions Anders again, which stokes Percy's anger, as Ripley obviously baits him. The party tries to convince him that the Briarwoods are the primary target, not Anders, but Percy falls for Ripley's bait and asks where Cassandra would be. Ripley replies that she would probably be in Anders' study, and Vex threatens to shoot her. Despite Keyleth's protest, most of the party heads down towards the basement as Vax is urged by his sister to sneak off down toward the hall in the direction of Anders' study. Heading in that direction, Vax puts on Clarota's helmet. In addition to the cloak he had taken from Count Tyleri's coffin, he nears the door that leads to Anders' study, and he hears a muffled female voice behind them and listens for a full minute. He's able to pick up two voices in the room, one of them being a young girl and the other being an older male, ordering her to be quiet until ordered to speak and that they should be close. Vax gently creaks the doors open just enough to peer inside and sees that Professor Anders is indeed holding a girl, most likely Cassandra, by the hair with a dagger at the throat. He then orders her to say exactly what she was told to say, the girl crying in his grasp. Vax backs away 5 steps, grabs his earring of whisper, and mutters, Jenga. The party receives the message and immediately runs back. Vax kicks the door open and immediately throws 2 daggers at Anders, successfully hitting him. Cassandra yells, no, run, it's a trap. Then Anders slits her throat. Enraged, Vax runs into the study, barely evading a trap, and stabs the professor repeatedly as he drops Cassandra to the ground. 2 suits of armor suddenly come to life and approach Vax and Anders. And Anders attempts to cast confusion, but thanks to the hero's feast, Vax succeeds on his save. Anders backs away as Vax takes a swipe and then inspires one of the helmed horrors. The suits of armor attack Vax with their longswords successfully as Cassandra clutches her bleeding throat, barely clinging to life. As they run into the study, Percy tells Ripley that if Cassandra lives and Ripley takes them to the caverns beneath, she'll walk with her things. Meanwhile, Vax takes his last potion of healing and feeds it to Cassandra, which works on sealing her neck wound, keeping her alive for the moment, and Vax places himself between the horrors and her. Grog sprints into the study, Scanlan trailing behind and inspiring Vex. Anders casts Dominate Person on Grog, who does fail his save, then orders the dominated Grog to kill Vax. The helmed horrors also surround Vax, dealing some very heavy damage. Keyleth arrives and casts Healing Word on Cassandra. Vex orders Trinket to clamp onto Ripley's arm, and then she sprints down the hall as well. Ripley, now held by Trinket, does stay put. Percy runs to the study, notices his barely conscious sister, and looks at Anders pulling off the hat of disguise. The smoke from before billows out of his body and begins to encompass him, increased by his rage. Anders is shocked at seeing his former pupil that he had betrayed 5 years ago, but Percy's gun misfires as he tries to shoot him. Percy roars in anger as he is forced to repair his weapon, and a severely wounded Vax disengages from the helmed horrors and stabs Anders twice, but the dominated Grog approaches Vax and smashes him twice with the firebrand warhammer. Vax is barely alive, but Grog manages to break free of the spell's hold, and despite feeling bad for Vax, he can't help but laugh a little. Scanlan finally makes his way to the room and fires 3 darts at the helmed horrors with his wand of magic missiles. He then inspires Grog as Anders attempts to cast Dimension Door, but Scanlan casts Counterspell. Angrily, the professor inspires the other helmed horror. One of the horrors goes for Vax, the other for Percy. Vax does fall unconscious, and Keyleth immediately casts Healing Word on him, then casts Grasping Vine to grab Cassandra's ankle and pull her towards her. Seeing her brother fall, Vex screams and slides towards him, casting Cure Wounds. Out in the hall, Ripley manages to break free of Trinket's jaws and reaches into her pocket. She throws a stone onto the ground, releasing a fog-like substance, and makes her escape. Percy manages to repair his gun and aims at Professor Anders, stepping closer with each shot he fires. He shouts, "Traitor!" and Anders tells him that all he had to do was die like a good Derolo. As Percy stands in front of him and lowers his mask, Anders says, "I die to rise again. We are his blood." Percy jams his gun into Anders's mouth and says, "You're the face I saw when murder entered my heart. This is your doing." Percy blows the back of Anders' head off and notices Anders's name vanishing from the barrel of his gun. The smoke subsides as Percy stands there motionless. Vax, Grog, Scanlan, and Keyleth continue to fight the helmed horrors as Vex grabs Percy's hand, asking how he is. He says he's fine, but Vex says one of her infamous lines, "Darling, take the mask off." She then fires 2 arrows at one of the helmed horrors to kill it off, while out in the hall, Ripley evades Trinket's second attempt to attack and sprints away. Percy removes the mask and unloads some shots at the remaining helmed horror unsuccessfully, but Grog and Vex manage to bring it down as Trinket does his best to pursue Ripley following her scent. Back in the study, Keyleth inspects Cassandra as Grog and Scanlan leave the room to pursue Ripley as well, and Percy cleans himself of Anders's blood. Vax, clutching his wound, stumbles over to Keyleth and says that was a close one. Keyleth responds, yeah, I kind of feel like we've been here before. Oh, right, we have been here before. And then Vax takes his turn to deliver one of his infamous one-liners. "You know I'm in love with you, right?" Keyleth is taken completely by surprise, and he kisses her, stunning everyone in the room. And that's what ends the first half. So, what do we think?
Oh my God, there's so many big things that happen, even in just this one half of the episode.
It's
We
very
have,
cinematic. It's very cinematic.
oh, it's very cinematic. The entire time that you were describing the uh the events of the episode, I was just thinking of when that didn't happen in the exact same order in the exact same way in the animated series, but I was just like jumping to like all the to those scenes in The Legend of Vox Machina and thinking about how well those were done and how well those translated.
Mm,
Um but yeah, so many big things happen. We get Ripley coming in and all of the stuff that comes with that. We get the fight with Anders and
yeah.
like Cassandra's throat getting slit. And then we have, of course, it ends off just with Vax's like confession of love for Keyleth. And it's just, I don't even know where to start talking about this episode.
I mean, it's episodes like these where it's easy to think it's scripted
Yeah.
because everything comes together so beautifully. Like the narrative itself is woven so beautifully in this first half. Like we've got action, we've got danger, we've got romance, we've got lore. Like all of it is being woven in a really
Hmm.
beautiful way. Like the storytelling, like all of the personalities, all of the character choices in this as well. Like I think this is such a notable, I mean, this isn't the beginning, but it's the beginning at the same time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
this is what sets them up as not just like fumbling idiots trying to do the best that they can, but setting them up to be the heroes that they end up being. Like, this is the starting point, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it just really shows like just how good at this the cast are because like it's not scripted. It
Yeah,
feels like it could be that way, but
yeah,
it's not. And that just really just goes to show how skilled they are at improv and how skilled Matt is at like weaving the story together and just it's so good.
yeah. I feel like everything that happened up until this point is the prologue.
Yeah.
And this is the first chapter of
Yeah.
being like, all right, we are, even though we've been burned with Clarota in the past, we are going to, for the time being, trust this Anna Ripley because she's the key, but they're going into it with open eyes this time. They're not going
Yeah,
into it
this time
blind.
there's none of that like blanket trust or anything like that. Like they're
Hmm.
going in with suspicion of her. It's more like they're using her to like help them in their goals rather than they are like befriending her. It's
Hmm.
like, especially with Percy's reaction, like they all know that she's suspicious. And like, yes, if she proves herself, like they'll reward her, but they're not, it's not like Chlorota where they just assume that she's an ally.
This is the first time that I've seen them. So, one of my favorite definitions of luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I think that's what we're seeing here is like these people, they've already played a few video games. They already know
Hmm.
that they need to cover their asses as they're going through this. Like, they throw out the caltrops, they make this very big deal of like having assurances with Anna Ripley as they're going through this. Like, this is the deal that we have, so on and so forth. Percy is very particular about the language that he uses when he's talking to her about what the
Yeah.
situations are. They're being very careful, intentional. And even though Vax does repeat his whole Jenga setup that we saw back in Amon, he does it, I think, with more tact and finesse this time around.
Yeah.
And there's just overall, I just they reached the next level, I think, in this whole
Hmm.
like we are adventurers and we kind of know what we're doing now, even though we don't really know the situation, we don't know what's going
Yeah.
on. We do know how to at least approach the situation this time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, I'm impressed by them.
Yeah. Yeah. And then of course that like confession of love right at the end. It's such an
Oh, we love
iconic
to see it.
moment. And
Yeah,
yeah.
we love to see
Yeah.
it. We love to see it. I mean, he shocks everyone at the table. Like, they obviously had to break at that moment because none of the actors knew what to do in that moment either.
Yeah.
But Liam knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, and this is the moment that like brought romance to Critical Role and that
Yeah,
made people realize, like I remember reading things that other cast members said that this is what made them realize that romance was like an option
yeah,
between the PCs and all
yeah,
of that. It's just such a substantial moment and there's like so many beautiful romances have happened like throughout Critical Role as a whole after this, and
yeah.
it's cool to think that like this is where it all started.
I mean, Marisha even looks to Matt after it happens, like, is this allowed? Like,
Yeah,
like, is this allowed to go this way? And, I think Matt just loves that it developed too, but it's an episode, I think, where we see maturation,
yeah,
like, not only as characters, but as adventurers.
hmm,
And we love to see it.
absolutely.
I mean, maybe do you think it was the confidence of having Pike in the previous episode that allowed them to get to this point?
Yeah, I think that probably plays into it. I think it also comes into it like they've kind of spent some time now formulating a plan and getting everybody on the same page. And so I think it's like a combination of those things. They had the
Hmm.
support of Pike. Uh, Now they've had the time to like really unite and come up with a game plan, and then here they are enacting it. And
Because there's been a lot of dissent going on. There's a lot of
mhm,
in-group arguing that's been happening in this Whitestone arc so far, and there still is a lot of arguing happening in this first half, right? Like they're debating whether to go after the Briarwoods first or whether it's even worth going to
mhm,
Ripley's chambers and finding Cassandra and dealing with Anders and all of this stuff because there is a literal rebellion happening outside. So there
mhm.
is definitely a time crunch here, but they're clicking together in a way that they haven't clicked before.
I think the stakes also play into that. Like here
Mm,
we are, we're like leading up to the final confrontation with the Briarwoods. They've built up this rebellion, and it's like, yes, there is kind of like room for this like debate and disagreement, but they've kind of like built themselves up for this path. The stakes are really high if they fail. Like they've got to like follow it through and see it through, and it feels like
hmm.
everybody's doing their part to do
Yeah.
that.
Like all I can imagine right now is like the epic like build up music that happens like before a fight begins in movies where they're like coming together as a team and like rushing towards the battle as like one cohesive unit and like, all of their lessons are coming to play here and it's just a wonderful glow up.
Yeah.
So any personal experiences that come to mind as we think about this first half?
Well, it's hard to say because I haven't exactly stormed a castle before or
What?
done any of
Really?
these
I
big
just stormed
epic
one last
things.
week.
But like, I mean, one thing that I have been thinking of is like, I mean, we've kind of talked about this with Percy entering Whitestone, but now this is Percy entering his home.
Mhm.
And this is Percy facing Ripley, who is like one of his greatest enemies. And it just like, what's really coming to me is thinking about like returning to a place of like trauma,
Mm,
like to a place where like a traumatic thing has happened, and like with people and like places that are connected to those memories, and just like what that experience must be like, and particularly in the fact like because it's not like, of course it's like sad and rough and difficult, but right now this is kind of like an act of reclaiming it. And
mm,
it really makes me think, because like I mean that's something that I've done in my own life. I
mm,
was like in a situation for a while where I was in like a pretty like emotionally abusive friendship. Like a friend
mm,
of mine who no longer friends with, thank God, like was really controlling and manipulative and
mm,
like left me with a lot of trauma, and just like the actions of like the effort that I've taken, because there are so many things that have become like tainted by that,
mm,
so many like places that we've gone together and so many like things we've enjoyed together, like movies or TV shows
mm,
or whatever, but like those things and places are still really important to me for other reasons, and so it just kind of like reminds me of the like actions that I've taken to like reclaim those things and take them
mm.
for myself. And that's kind of what Percy and what the rest of Vox Machina
Yeah.
are doing here. They're taking this place that's full of this hurt and pain and trauma and terrible memories. And I mean, it's just beginning. It's going to take time for it to like heal and be reclaimed. But this is it. Like they're taking those actions to
Hmm.
reclaim.
Hmm. I mean, it's almost like a success over imposter syndrome
Exactly.
because they're moving from victim mentality to like action mentality, like the actual harbinger of transformation. And I think that that's a powerful position to move into,
Hmm.
is like you are in control over this process and you do have some level of competence in this process too.
Yeah.
because they're no longer bumbling, fumbling idiots just running around with the chickens with their heads cut off. Like, oops, I
Yeah.
guess we succeeded here. Go us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's important too with the aspect of reclaiming traumatic experiences. And I definitely can relate to this whole triumph over imposter syndrome concept is like being like, oh, wait, I do have a level of confidence and competence in this situation that previously I didn't. I try like to think of growth as a spring. Sometimes it does feel like you're going in circles because you're running into the same things over and over and over again, but
Mm-hmm.
you're at a slightly different level on the spring the
Yeah.
next time you get to it because you have the experience from before informing the way that you approach the same situation, whatever it is. And I think they're at that second level now. And I think that's true in so many of our lives is like going back, like I think of it when I'm going back home, because when I travel home, it's easy to revert back to like teenage Claire
Mm-hmm.
of just being like angsty and upset and just emotionally irrational. But now I can go back and be like, huh, I can approach this from a different perspective now when
Mm-hmm.
here and have a different experience as a result of that. I don't have to repeat the same old emotional relationships that I have with various family members over and over and over again. I can choose to step outside of that old cycle and maybe
Yeah.
regress the relationship to a different level or at least disengage from whatever that same cycle is
Mm-hmm.
time again. Like I definitely have like family vacation spots that trigger emotional irrationality in me whenever I go visit. And it's definitely been a process for me to be like, okay, I'm disengaging from these triggers and approaching them from a different perspective now. And I'm not
Yeah.
awesome at it yet. It's
It
definitely a
takes
practice.
time. It's a process. Yeah. You're
hmm
never gonna get something right away.
Yeah, because Percy also doesn't know what he's going to find with Cassandra here.
No.
And I think that, both Vex and Keyleth are valid in questioning whether they can even trust Cassandra in this. And, I think he's hoping for the best, as I would hope he would hope for the best in this situation. But he also doesn't know what they're going to get
Yeah.
because she's also been through her fair amount of trauma. And
Absolutely. And she's been in it longer than
yeah,
he has. Like,
yeah,
he ran away and like, I mean, he thought she was dead, but like he got out and has spent the past like while living
hmm
outside of that, whereas she's been stuck in it.
hmm
She hasn't been able to get out. She hasn't been able to have that like reprieve.
hmm Yeah, I mean, there's a new level of competence that we're seeing here that I can genuinely relate to. It's like whenever you start any new endeavor, whether it's learning music, learning art, learning a language, learning a skill set, like when you start out, you're just kind of trying your best, seeing how it goes, but then you reach a certain tipping point where you're like, oh, I am starting to feel maybe not comfortable in this, but at least I kind of know what I'm doing here.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is such a relief sometimes. It's a confidence booster sometimes. It's also energizing. Like, fuck yeah, I know what I'm doing here. I may not
Yeah.
know everything, but at least I know to throw some caltrops down just in case. Or have Trinket hold on to Ripley while I run and go deal with this issue, even though it didn't work out the way that she wanted it to. But,
Mhm.
that's definitely relatable, is like any
Yeah.
endeavor that you get into. there's a tipping point there. And I think so many people quit before that tipping point happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't know if they were thinking of quitting in the previous two episodes, but they were definitely squabbling about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean it's easy to reach that point. Like it's hard to know when things are going to tip and when things are going to get better. And
Hmm.
if you're in something really difficult, it's difficult to keep pushing forward if you don't know when the end is in sight or how
I
much more
mean,
you're gonna have to fight.
I've been in that exact place for the last 3 months. I did a really big commitment, a really big project that stretched all of my capabilities. Like it emotionally exhausted me physically, mentally. And I did hit a point where I was like, I don't know if I can continue on with this. And I was right before like that tipping point.
Hmm.
And I had a day where I just felt like a sad, self-centered sack of shit, where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I'm about to throw in the flag. And like, it really does take a lot of fortitude to be like, all right, let's just see it out for another day. Let's just see it out for another. Like, that's honestly how I had to convince myself to do it. Like, I couldn't even think about the
Yeah.
week. I had to think about day by day, hour by hour, like even half an hour by half an hour. I was like, all right, let's just get through the next 30 minutes and then we'll reevaluate.
Hmm.
And I think that they're in that at the moment. But I think once they had that long rest and the hero's feast, that may have been the refresh that they needed, that
Yeah.
boost that they needed in order to continue trying.
Yeah, exactly. Because just like how like long rest and short rest mechanics are built into D&D, you can't keep pushing and fighting nonstop. Doesn't matter what it
Yeah,
is. Like you rest is an important part of like recovery and rest is an important part of like fighting as well. Like you can't run at 100% all the time.
yeah, absolutely. Well, what are we gonna do?
I feel like there's lots of things that we can do, but I think the biggest thing is that, like, just looking at everything that Vox Machina is doing to fight here in Whitestone and just thinking about, like, everything that I've done in my life to, like, fight for my own healing and my own
Mm,
growth and all of these things, I think I what I'm gonna take away from this is to just, like, have confidence in
mm,
how far I've come and into who I am today. And like, yes, there are moments where I still like really struggle with like self-esteem and anxiety. Like that doesn't go away. Like the results of being in the sort of situation I was in, it messes with your head and with your
mm,
ability to believe in yourself and like yourself.
mm.
But like overall, I'm doing really great for where I was back then. And so I think just celebrating that and having confidence in that.
You're here. I will absolutely celebrate that. 100% for sure. I mean, I've been working lately on being grateful. Like, I know gratitude is such a cliche practice, but I fall in and out of favor with it. I'm not great at being grateful every day of the year, but I will have like every other quarter where I'll try to like really tap into the gratitude. And I actually just did that in my meditation today, where I have to remind myself that I'm grateful for both what I receive as well as what is released. Because you can fall into such a scarcity mindset sometimes of like, well, I don't have this, and I don't have that, and I don't have this, and what if this takes is taken away from me? And it's sometimes things that you don't even want, really, at the end of the day, but just because you're losing it makes it feel like a loss, even though it's ended up actually being a good thing. So I think it's diving deep into this gratitude practice and just being like, yes, I am grateful for the things that have happened to me and for the lessons that I've learned from it and for whatever has been released from my energetic field because of it as well. I mean, we live in a capitalistic society, so scarcity mindset is kind of pernicious at the end of the day,
Hmm.
but it's beautiful out. It's summertime. I've got a lot more free time than I did because the commitment is over. And so I've been trying to not fight with my own mind with how much space I have now to just like sit and think about things. I'm like, let's not overthink things. Let's just enjoy the space that I have instead of trying to shove it full of everything else. And,
Yeah.
my life isn't complete because it's not chock full of what could very well be nonsense.
Yeah.
Like there's a difference between fulfilled and overfilled, and I'm trying to find
Yeah.
the balance, I think, right now.
The difficult balance to find, but an important one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, anything else you want to talk about before we start wrapping things up?
Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I mean, I am so excited for where this goes. I mean, a lot of people think that like the Briarwood arc is the real beginning to campaign one, and I would almost argue that this episode is the real beginning to campaign one. Like I said before, I think everything leading up to this was the prologue. Like if I was writing this as a book, because am an author and I do think about things in this way, I would have had the events leading up to the Briarwood arc as like flashbacks to kind of explain the character's actions in the Briarwood arc. You know what I mean? Instead of going
Yeah.
through action action by action to get up to this point, I think it would have been because the actions and the behaviors and the character choices that they make in this episode were informed by those earlier episodes,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't have detailed those former episodes play by play in order to make the point.
Yeah.
It's more
That makes sense.
supporting evidence, supporting lore, supporting backstory more so than, but we love a good rebellion.
Yeah.
Well, this is powerful stuff that we're talking about. And audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts and feelings and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how Critical Role has impacted you in your own lives. Special thanks to Petall for joining me on this episode. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always love coming in and having these conversations.
Yeah, and we are getting into the really juicy stuff now. All of the great
Absolutely.
one-liners. Oh my God, so many good one-liners in this episode. So next time we'll be discussing the second half of this episode, Campaign 1, Episode 33, and joining me will be Petall again, so I'm excited for that. As always, I'm looking for more co-hosts and guests, so if you're interested in coming on, hit me up. And in the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe below, follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR for all the juicy updates. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and be the chaotic good you wish to see in the world. Take care, guys.